One such tale originates from the sleepy town of Palmyra, Maine, where a man's life was forever changed by a chilling encounter with a creature that defies explanation. The autumn air was brisk as Eric Martin was on the porch of his secluded property in Palmyra, Maine. The trees rustled with the gentle breeze and their leaves a tapestry of orange and red. Eric, who was a pragmatic man and a veteran, found solace in the quiet of his rural home. His wife, Shelley, and their two children, Chelsea and Sean, had joined him in seeking a life away from the city's hustle and bustle. And it was October 2009, a night just like any other, or so they thought. Shelley was inside preparing for dinner, and Chelsea was upstairs in her room, and Sean was playing with his toy cars in the living room. Eric, sipped his tea, enjoying just the serenity of the evening, when he noticed something very unusual. Small orbs of light dancing through the trees at the edge of their property. At first he kind of, squinted, trying to make sense of this phenomenon, and his first thought was, it's poachers. So he said, Shelley, do you see that? And that's when Shelley joined him on the porch and said, what is that? Those lights, it's probably nothing, but I'm gonna go check it out. Why don't you keep the kids inside? So at this point, Eric grabbed his rifle, a precaution more than anything. And Shelley was very uneasy with guns, so she had insisted that they keep them locked up in the barn. Tonight, though, Eric felt a nagging sense of urgency almost, and he motioned for Sean to join him, thinking, a quick walk would be harmless. As he kind of reassured his son, he said, stay close, Sean, we're just gonna go take a quick look. So they stepped out into the chilly night, and the flashlight was cutting through the darkness as they approached the tree line. And when they got there, the lights at this point had vanished, replaced just by this eerie silence. And the forest, usually alive with nocturnal sounds, seemed to be almost holding its breath. Dad, did you hear that? Sean whispered. Eric then kind of strained to listen. He could hear a low growl echoed from the shadows, followed by a rustling in the underbrush. His heart pounded and he said, yeah, we should probably get back. So at that point, he gripped Sean's hand tighter and they retreated to the safety of their house, unease gnawing at Eric's gut at this point. The very next day, Chelsea and her boyfriend decided to take the dogs for a walk, and the crisp air and vibrant fall colors provided a perfect backdrop for their outing. And the dogs, energetic and curious, actually led them deeper into the woods than usual. And suddenly the dogs stopped, and their ears perked up, and their noses were twitching. Chelsea said, what is it, boy? And that's when the dogs bolted, pulling Chelsea and her boyfriend towards this dense thicket. They stumbled upon almost like this makeshift den, and the smell of decay was just wafting throughout the air, and Chelsea's heart kind of raced as she heard this deep growl from within the den. Her boyfriend's face kind of got a little pale, and he said, hey guys, let's get out of here. And at this point, they hurried back home, the encounter kind of leaving them shaken. And that evening, they shared their experience with Eric and Shelley, and the family felt an undercurrent of fear kind of just settling in. Their once peaceful home was now tinged with unease. A few nights later, Eric and Shelley were sitting on the porch enjoying the quiet when a sudden sense of dread washed over Eric. I mean, he really couldn't explain it, but he knew something was wrong. So he said, Shelley, we need to go inside right now. And Shelley saw the seriousness in his eyes and really didn't argue. So they hurried inside and locked the doors. And Eric turned on the floodlights, illuminating the gravel path leading to their home. And that's when they saw it. 5 sets of eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting the light with an unnatural intensity. What is that? Shelley whispered. And that's when the figure in the middle stood up on 2 legs, towering over 7 feet tall. It had the head of a wolf and the body of like a man, a grotesque blend between human and beast. The creature then stared at them, its eyes seemingly piercing their souls. Eric said, we can't stay here. I need to get the guns from the barn. But the barn felt miles away with those things lurking outside. So instead, he decided to get the truck and get the family out of there. But Eric stepped outside and his hands were trembling so bad as he fumbled with the keys, and the night was unnaturally still. The only sound was his labored breathing, and he accidentally dropped the keys, cursing under his breath. Panic surged through him like electricity as he glanced over his shoulder, and the creatures hadn't moved, but their eyes tracked his every step. So he ran back inside, slamming the door behind him. And that's when he said to his family, we have to barricade ourselves in. So they went and they locked the doors and the windows, and their hearts were pounding, mind you, during all this. And for hours they sat, huddled together, kitchen knives clutched in their hands. And all that time, the creatures just circled the house, their growls and sniffs echoing through the walls. They scratched at the doors, testing it for weaknesses, their claws leaving deep gouges in the wood. At this point, it was serious, and they were desperate, so Shelley actually dialed 911, and she said, there are creatures outside our house. They're trying to get in. The operator, of course, sounded skeptical and said, ma'am, it's probably just some animals. Stay inside and they'll go away. And Shelley said, no, you don't understand. Please, these aren't normal animals. Please, send someone. But the response was really dismissive. The family was on their own. And hours dragged by, each minute an eternity. The growls and scratches continued, a constant reminder of the terror just outside their door. Eric's mind raced with all the possibilities. What are these creatures? Why are they targeting my family? He thought of his military training, the things that he had seen in combat, but nothing had prepared him for this. The fear was primal, a deep-seated horror that gnawed at his resolve. Shelley then clung to him, her eyes wide open in fear, and just said, what are we gonna do? And Eric said, we stay until morning. They can't get in. And he was trying to sound confident, but of course he wasn't sure, and the night seemed endless, the darkness pressing in on them. Chelsea and Sean were huddled together, and their young faces were pale and in fear. Dad, what if they get in? Sean asked. His voice was literally small and scared. And Eric said, they won't, I promise. Even though at that point he was doubting his own words. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, the growling and scratching ceased. So Eric cautiously peeked outside, and the creatures were gone. So he unlocked the door and he stepped out, his legs weak with relief. The ground was covered in massive footprints larger than any wolf's, deep claw marks marred into the door and walls, a testament to the night's terror. And they found tufts of black fur near the door, coarse and thick. Eric picked one up, with his hands still shaking. This isn't from any animal I've ever seen, he said. It was at this point that the family decided to leave, unable to stay in a place that had become a nightmare. They packed their belongings and moved, the memory of that night still haunting them. And in the days that followed, Eric tried to make sense of what had just happened. So he reached out to local authorities, but their response was the same. It must have been a bear or a wolf. But Eric knew better. He had seen the creatures, felt their malevolent presence. They were something else, something otherworldly. And the family's story spread through Palmyra, Maine, met with a mix of skepticism and fear. Some believed them, sharing their own strange tales of sightings and unearthly howls. But of course others, just dismissed it as a figment of overactive imaginations. But for Eric and his family, the terror was all too real. And moving to a new town, brought some peace, but the memory of that night never left them. Eric found himself more vigilant and always on edge. Shelley struggled with nightmares, her sleep plagued by the image of those glowing eyes. Chelsea and Sean tried to move on, but the fear always lingered. Eric delved into research seeking answers, and he read about cryptids, creatures of folklore that defied explanation. And then he read about the Dog Man, a creature described in legends as part wolf, part human, matched what he had seen. But knowing didn't bring him any comfort. Now, there's actually more to the story, which I'm about to tell you right now, but it's of course not authenticated, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least tell you what I found. Supposedly, Eric had decided to confront his fear, to understand what had terrorized his family, so he reached out to paranormal investigators, hoping they could shed light on the mystery, and they listened to his story, intrigued by the details. And the investigator actually said, we've heard of similar encounters. These creatures, whatever they are, seem to appear in remote areas. People describe them as dog-like, but with human characteristics. Eric felt a mixture of relief and dread. He wasn't alone, but that meant others had faced the same terror, and the investigators agreed to visit Palmyra to gather evidence and hopefully provide answers. So Eric returned to Palmyra with the investigators, his heart heavy with apprehension. The town looked the same, but it felt different. It felt darker. They visited the old property, now abandoned, and the memories just flooded back. The fear as fresh as if it happened yesterday. So the investigators set up the equipment, scanning for any signs of the creatures, and they actually found the same massive footprints and the same tufts of hair. And then one investigator said, "There's something here, and it's not of this world." Please make sure to subscribe and turn on all your notifications for upcoming episodes. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you later. Cheers.